Danny Frank for GNAT TV. We're on the floor at the famous Northshire bookstore in Manchester, Vermont, which has the reputation for being one of the finest independent bookstores in America. And it's my pleasure, my privilege to have one of the icons in sports journalism in America, Mike Lupica. Mike, thank you so much for coming to our show.
Thanks, Danny.
And I know that you have your latest book, Point Guard, which you're going to be speaking about at Northshire Books. Tell me about Point Guard.
Well, it's part of what we call the Home Team series. It's for Simon & Schuster, which is one of my publishers. And it's the idea when I started it was to have 4 main characters, and they would each get a book of their own where they got to be the main character. They're 4 friends, Jack and Cassie and Gus and Teddy. And this one is set in the world of basketball, and Cassie is the star athlete their age in town, the 12, 13 age. And she decides to go out for the boys' basketball team. And she's good enough to make it, but it causes some friction with her friend Gus, who believes that she should play on the girls' team and the boys should play on the boys' team. And they figure it out across the season. And the book's really as much about friendship as it is about basketball. Their friendship gets tested for the first time, and they have to figure it out. They have to figure out how to be good friends and good teammates.
You've written so many books, I think about 40 books actually that you've written, not to mention your columns every day or every week, and television and radio commentary. In terms of books, what's the beginning of the book? How does it come together? What's the thought process that goes into determining how you create a book, Mike Lupica?
I had written books for 20 years for adults. I had written novels. I'd written Reggie Jackson's autobiography. I'd written Bill Parcells' autobiography. I wrote a book called Mad as Hell about how sports had gotten away from fans and how they could get it back. And I'm the parent of 4 children. I have 3 boys and a girl. And when my middle son was 12, he and a friend of his got cut from a travel basketball team for being too small. They didn't say that, the town fathers, but it was pretty clear that that's what happened. And it was the first time sports broke Alex's heart. And, you know, kids are resilient. They bounce back. But a couple of days later, I'm talking to Jeff Van Gundy, who's a friend of mine. He coached the Knicks. He'd later coached the Rockets. He's great on TV now, doing the NBA. And he said, you know, if this were the movies, you'd take all the kids who got cut, you'd start a team of your own, and you'd play the other team in town in the big game. And I said, well, I don't have anything against the other team in town. They didn't do anything wrong. But for the last 13 years, I've gone around the country and talked about these books. I tell kids the problem with a good idea is once it gets inside your head, it's impossible to get out. So 3 days later, I became the owner and general manager of a rogue 12-year-old boys travel basketball team. I took all the kids who got cut, I started a team of my own, I hired a coach, I scheduled a season, and now all these boys were going to have a season that they weren't going to otherwise have. And now I made a couple of mistakes. One is I didn't ask the other coaches how good their teams were. So early in the season, my team couldn't get the ball over half court. We're going into these gyms, and when I think back on these games now, it's like 35-3 at halftime. These kids feel worse now than when they get cut. I went to the coach and I said, we have to call this off. It's like a science experiment that's gone horribly and tragically wrong. He said, no, they're getting better. I said, no. They're not getting better, they're getting worse. I said, there's 2 boys on the team. I'm not even sure if they're right-handed anymore. But here's the point of the story. They got better. They picked themselves up, they came together as a team, and they started to win some games. They started to beat the teams that had beaten them at the start of the season. And it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life, watching these kids get their self-esteem back and actually do more than they thought they were going to do. So the season ends, and we have a big old party. They win their last game by 1 point. It's like a movie. I did get my Hollywood ending. They win their last game by a point over a team that had beaten them early in the season. They run around the gyms like they've won the championship of the world. So the kids go back to being in the 7th grade, but I can't let go of the season because I knew I saw something great. So I said to my agent, I don't know whether this is a movie or whether it's a story of these kids or a novel. She said, write an outline for a novel. I write a 3-page outline one morning about a little boy who gets cut for being too small. The book is different from our story, obviously. She calls me up 2 hours later. She said, we have a deal for you to write this book. So for the first time in my life, with no plan to write this kind of book, I am a young adult writer now. Now, in retrospect, my wife Taylor says, honey, let's face it, you writing from inside the mind of a 12-year-old seems like pretty much a perfect fit, as far as I can tell. She said, now it's nice that you can use your immaturity to help the family. So I write the book, and Penguin Philomel Books, they print 20,000 copies of this book. And I swear to God, I thought it was like 19,000 too many. I thought it was going to be a nice little stocking stuffer for the kids who played on my team and their parents, their grandparents. It sells 500,000 books, and within 10 days, it's #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And because everybody had a story like it. It didn't have to be basketball. It didn't have to be too small. Kids are always being told they're too something. You know, I coached all my kids in all their sports, and I was always fascinated how even the most well-meaning Little League coaches would look at what kids couldn't do as opposed to looking at what they could do. And so, and now I was in this world, and now this is 13 years later, and 5 million books later, I became known as the king of the reluctant readers. And especially known as somebody who got boys who didn't want to read to want to read. And it's been the greatest experience of my professional career.
But Mike Lupica, obviously, people will buy your book and read your book because it's Mike Lupica, right?
No, I actually don't think that's true. If it were that easy, I would have sold 100 million books. And
you're a product, you're a brand.
But these books are these have always been word of mouth books. What happened with Travel Team was librarians and moms were telling other librarians and other moms, you know, there's this book, and he didn't want to read before. Because for all of the adults who know who I am because of columns or TV or radio show, 12-year-old kids have no idea who I am. And the kids who will be upstairs today, they don't care about my column, they don't care about my podcast or MSNBC or all the work I did at ESPN. They're only there because of these books. But when I started writing these books, I had no relationship with these kids. So I had to earn their trust, and I had to earn their belief that I was willing to, that it was a good idea to spend $10 or $15 or $20 on one of my books.
2 questions tied to youth, Mike Lupica, A and B. Number 1, from your perspective, we're talking here about kids, and over the years, you must have observed children who get into sports, participate in sports, and they have that passion, that dream that they're going to be a star, or they've focused on an idol, whether it's a Tiger Woods or a baseball player or this new guy Judge now, right? And they want to be like them, the role models, and yet so few youngsters will ever make it to professional sports where they're on a professional team. But the dynamics of that passion and that dream that so many kids and their parents and families harbor, and maybe the pressure of that.
Yeah, no, I talk about it. I have generally 2 books a year, so I tour 2 times a year. So I've spoken at hundreds of schools around the country, and I always tell kids, I say, listen, some of you in this hall today are going to go on to high school sports, and then some of you may go on to college sports, and I said, there may be somebody sitting out here who's going to go on to the pros. But I said, but if you don't, there's going to be a point in your life where sports tells you you're not good enough. Sports is a meritocracy. You either can or you can't. And I said, so you got to be prepared for that day. But what I tell the kids is, appreciate every day you have now. Because, I'll talk about this today with these kids, I would give $1 bazillion to go back and have one more Friday night or Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon to coach my kids again and have them be 10 or 11 or 12 or 13. And I tell them, someday you think I'm crazy, you'll give $1 bazillion to have one more game to play with or against your friends on a Saturday afternoon. So I said, my books are written in that spirit. So I said, the next game you play, you make sure you appreciate it because you don't know how many of those you're going to have in your life.
Any advice to the parents of America who push their kids or pressure their kids or build a foundation around them and maybe it's not the best thing to do?
Just be realistic and make sure that your kids' dreams are aligned with yours. Don't make your dreams a part of your child's life if they don't want them. They only want their own dreams. One of the greatest things that has come just in terms of sports, from especially having my sons, is they don't want to hear about the good old days. They have made me stay current with sports. My kids tell me all the time, Dad, the good old days are now. And they don't want to, they appreciate who Michael Jordan is, but they understand how fast the walkway keeps moving. Michael's old news to kids now. Kobe is old news. LeBron doesn't think he's going to be old news. He'll be old news. And somebody else is always coming along. But what always made me crazy is about 2% of the coaches I coached with or against gave all the other 98% a bad name. This whole idea of little league coaches, most of them are great. Most of them are given their time and understanding how valuable this experience is. And they understand the most important thing about youth sports, which is this. It's not about you. It's never about you. It's about the kids. I used to tell my kids when I coach them, I said, you know what? One team in the league is going to approach sports the way I think you're supposed to approach sports. And I said, I can't control them. I said, I can't control them, but we're going to do things the right way. I said, when the ref calls a foul, put your hand up and shut up. Because he doesn't care whether you think it was a good call or not. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know why I thought about it. I was coaching my youngest son, Zach, who made me look really good. He was the point guard in the family. A parent in the gym yelled something at a ref, and they called a technical foul on my team. And I was always aware that the refs, they knew who I was. So I always had a great. And the ref's name was Jerry Costello. I said, Jerry, what just happened? He said, that guy over there was dogging me, and I called a technical foul. And it's like, he's a nice guy. And he turned into a werewolf watching his kid play basketball. And I called him over. I said, you have to shut up now. I said, these kids are trying to win the game, and if they lose by 2 points today, it's because of the 2 points you just gave them because of a technical foul. It's not about you. It's not about me. Now, I felt I had a duty to try to teach them values and X's and O's as well as I could, but it's their day. That hour out there, that's gold to these kids, And parents, as long as they understand, it's not about. There's a great line from the movie Rocky. Nobody understands a man's dreams except himself. It's the same with kids.
Speaking of parents and kids, and we're in the age of transparency, and the romance or excitement of being a professional athlete,
right.
the glamour of that, and how can we better get across to young people that it isn't all glamour. It's a lot of hard work and dedication to be and diligence and rejection. How do we bring that out more?
I have never in my life questioned how much an athlete made. This is a select few people who are the best on the planet at what they do. So they should be able to make, and I think kids have an unrealistic idea sometimes that if they're good and they work hard enough, that they can do that too. Well, no, you can't. I mean, you can work hard, but you have to understand that whatever the percentage is of kids playing youth sports in this country, like 1/10 of 100, whatever it is, finally make it all the way to the pros. But these are people who didn't show up there because they just decided it would be fun to be Steph Curry you see the work that goes into producing these careers, and then you realize it's way more than work. That there's a God-given ability plus work ethic plus determination. I mean, Michael Jordan was the toughest person I ever met. I've always, the great LeBron-Michael debate. I can come up with more reasons why LeBron James can do more things well than Michael did on a basketball court. But I always say that if I had to pick one of them to play for my life, it's Michael. I was talking tennis there. I just came back from Wimbledon with my youngest son, and the Federer-Sampras debate is a great debate. And a tennis coach I know kind of says the same thing about Federer that I say about LeBron. He can do more things well than Pete did. But if he had to pick one of them to play for his life, he'd pick Pete. And we're talking about genius with these guys. Genius plus passion plus hard work plus good luck, good health. Man, oh man, it's hard to get to be these guys.
Mike Lupica, we're both in media, and one of the questions I get all the time from a younger person, a college person, they say, well, I want to be a sports writer, or I want to write in sports, or I want to be a sports broadcaster. And in today's world, in today's industry, what advice do you have for those young people today, especially when they think maybe that they're just going to start out and, be on TV or radio?
I don't know if anybody thinks that anymore. I feel bad sometimes that the business was so big and lucrative and wide open when I started, and it's just not like that anymore. But I firmly believe that if you have talent, you will still be found. You will still find a way. When I was at Boston College, I was writing for 3 school papers. I was working nights at the Boston Globe. I was writing for the Boston Phoenix, which was kind of the village voice of Boston. I was chasing my own dreams as hard as I could. I joke with the kids now, they have to buy these books because I have no other skills. I could write, and my ability to write has given me a wonderful life. My only career plan was to get to New York and write a newspaper column and see if I could then write books like Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill did. So I tell kids, it's harder now. I don't sugarcoat it. It breaks my heart when I'll see a talented kid say, how can I get into the business? And I just tell them, find an outlet, find a platform, and then just make sure that you do your best work. I can't stress how many times in my life somebody saw something that I wrote before anybody in the world really knew who I was. But whatever it was my best work that day. And you don't know, and I tell kids this all the time, you don't know what the day is where somebody's going to see your work and say, hey, that young man or that young woman has talent, and I want to talk to them. So all you can do is my father, my 93-year-old war hero father, he gave me the best piece of journalistic advice that anybody in the business ever gave me. If you don't promote yourself, no one else will. And I have followed that for 40 years and still do to this day. So if you want to write. If you want to be on television, find a way, find a platform, find an outlet, and then just hope that you get seen.
Mike Lupica, you cover all sports. Mm-hmm. Which is a rarity. Many sports writers or columnists, they focus on one particular league or one particular sport, Explain to our viewers what you have to do to keep up, to be current, to be well-read, to be knowledgeable on all aspects of sports. What's your regimen?
I've always been passionate about sports. I always told my kids, if there's a game going on and it's being played at a high level and somebody's keeping score, even if it's like lacrosse, which I don't know a heck of a lot about, I'll become engaged. But I have had this reputation as being controversial, but I most of the time am going to a game or to an event to celebrate sports. I'm looking for the great moment. I, in addition to writing columns for the Daily News now, I write for sportsonearth.com, which has been a tremendous outlet for me. I wrote a column that you can find right now about Jose Altuve of the Houston Astros. He is my size. He is my size, this guy. And he probably is the best all-around player in baseball. And it's the second time in 5 months that I've written about him. Where they play in spring training is close to where our home is in Florida. So I had the Astros and the Nationals within 20 minutes of my house. And I walked into that clubhouse that day, and I knew pretty much what his height was. And here's a kid who didn't let that hold him back for 5 minutes. Those are the stories that I love to tell about sports, because he's not playing in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles. He's playing in Houston, and all of a sudden, kids ask me, does size matter in sports? I say, absolutely. The size of your talent and the size of your heart. And after that, nothing else matters.
But like a pianist practices a few hours a day, you must devote a good part of your day to research, to reviewing the standings and reviewing the records of players.
I got up this morning and I wrote my Sunday column for the Daily News, Shooting from the Lip. I wrote a lot of it yesterday and a lot of it finished it this morning. And it was about the Yankees and what a wonderful surprise they've been this year. And I called the Elias Sports Bureau and I said, it seems to me they've won a lot of games from the ninth inning on this year. And I called him up and he said, you're right. They're tied with the Dodgers. They have won games 6 times where they've been trailing in the ninth inning or later. So I put that into my column, and I recite some of the games where they hit walk-off home runs this year. And then I called up the general manager of the Yankees, Brian Cashman, and then got a couple of quotes for him. And it's just, every column, it's just like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, but they're all the same. They have a beginning, a middle, an end, a point of view, and hopefully what I'm saying about something makes people want to read it.
And roughly how long does it take you to assemble a column, put it together? Is it?
I don't know about the thought time, but once I start writing, it takes me about an hour. Once I have a couple of paragraphs written, I'm in pretty good shape.
Covering all the sports, what is your favorite sport?
I still like baseball the best, but when I was a kid starting out in the business, one of my mentors was the late Bud Collins, and he started taking me to Wimbledon. And so now I don't have to go to Wimbledon, but it's a way to kind of recapture my beginnings in the business. And so this year, my youngest son, he's 25 now, my wife and daughter were on safari in Africa. The other 2 were working. Zach could get time off. I said, let's go to Wimbledon. We went to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at Wimbledon. And I really only wrote columns for the fun of it. But I've always had a soft spot for tennis because it was kind of the first sport where I made any money.
What professional sport do you feel still has enormous potential, hasn't achieved its potential yet in terms of audience, in terms
Well, I think soccer in the United States. I'm the father of soccer players.
Right.
All my sons played soccer. My youngest boy was a really good soccer player in high school. And
soccer is so big
everywhere.
in
fact, this September, I'm going back to London for a week. And one of the things that's on my bucket list that I still haven't done is see a Premier League game in person. So this might be I love soccer, but because Zachy, my youngest, was so good at it, my appreciation became enhanced. And now if there's a game on, I will absolutely watch it. And I don't know as much about it as I do about baseball, for example, but I love they didn't have a soccer team at my high school in New Hampshire when I was growing up. But I'm a pretty good athlete, but that would have been my best sport.
And is there an athlete that is, in your mind, your all-time favorite?
Michael.
Some people look up to Babe Ruth.
Easy. I don't look up to
Michael.
Michael was the main event. Michael was the main event. I saw him make the shot that beat Georgetown to win the NCAA championship when he was in college. I saw all the 6 championships. Michael was my main event.
So we're here talking with Mike Lupica. He's, as I started the show saying, he's an icon sports journalist. He has a new book out called Point Guard, and we're here at Northshire Books, and there are many other books that Mike Lupica has written, Last Man Out, and this is the Extra Yard. Do enjoy Mike Lupica's books, and Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the show.
Thanks for doing it from here.
So,
this is bookstores like this are the rock solid foundation of what any author does, and I love this store. I am here all the time when I'm in Manchester, and thank you for doing this today.
This is Danny Frank for GNAT TV.